Perfect. So we have a recording on, and we're, I think, on week 10, whatever the week number is. We're on a urinary system. So we're going to do a really quick session today. A, because the material on this and the next chapter, it's not that much. It's actually quite a simple one. And B, because of the kind of weekly announcements, there's not much new stuff that a lot of this you already know. Just to kind of go quickly, what I want to do, I want to mention a couple of words about this week's module and apologize. That's always a good way to start a session. And then I want to mention a couple of words about the exam 2 and practical 2. Then we'll look at this week's module. And then I have the normal stuff that I've always said that, oh, you can retake that stuff. And there's review groups and tutoring and all that. But the first thing that I wanted to do, I wanted to start by apologizing that this week's module wasn't open first thing on Monday morning. You might have noticed. And I am not going to pretend that it was fault of something else. It was my fault. So I was with the Conservation Corps at the Grand Canyon, hiking there to the bottom. It snowed, we got stuck there. It was hard to get out. So rather than sacrificing anyone's life by rushing back, I just made a decision that you guys, you'll survive it, that the module doesn't open, because obviously they don't have TV or cell phone antennas there, that the module didn't open until a little late. And in order, because it was opened a little late, it's going to be open for 2 weeks. So this week and the next week. So you have almost 2 weeks to finish it. So at the end of the day on Sunday, not the coming Sunday, but the Sunday after that on November 8th is where I'm going to move all the deadlines. And I'm going to do it right after this session. But if you need more time, then you let me know. But I really do want to apologize for that. We figured out that it's better to play it safe and not have anyone falling. I'm telling you, it's a long way down there to the bottom of Grand Canyon. So that's just a quick announcement about this week's module. So you'll have time. And as always, I'm happy to pass any extra time that's needed. In terms of the exam 2 and practical 2, I'm almost finished with the grading of that. I just want to do one more check on that it's graded similarly to everyone. So stay tuned. I will post on the announcements when the grades are up and ready. I've had already some panicky messages that I didn't get the grade that I wanted, but those grades that you are seeing at the moment are not the final grades. This week, like I said, all of the assignments have been extended until not the coming Sunday, but the Sunday after that. And if you need any extra time, then you just let me know. There's nothing new in terms of the assignments. We have the LearnSmart, which is the reading the textbook and it asks questions. We have the quiz, and we have the practice anatomy. But then with the lab, we get back to the painful character of the Phil's labs. And you remember that from the last time. That was the one that runs on the Flash. And because Flash is disappearing at the end of this year, there's so much bugs and so much all sorts of drama with that. So you need to enable the Flash player. And I think that if you were able to figure it last time, you'll be fine. If you were not, I really recommend doing one of those one-on-one sessions with me, and we can get your browser to run the Flash. There's 2 spots where it's either at the end of the address bar. You need to click there. There might be a lock with a red slash through it or something else. And you click on that and you choose Allow Flash. And then there's another space. Usually students get this first one done, but they skip the second one. So right at the beginning of the address bar, there's also something like an exclamation mark and a text that says that this is not secure. You have to click on that. And when you click on that, there's going to be a symbol of a jigsaw puzzle piece and Flash written next to it. And right next to that, there's a drop-down menu where you choose Allow for the Flash to play. And if you do that, if you do both of those, you will be able to access the Flash. Here is a picture of the second one. This is the one that students often accidentally overlook, and I don't blame them. It's weird that you need to accept it in 2 spots, but it says not secure and an exclamation mark. You click on that and there's a drop-down menu. However, if you get stuck, like I said, do talk to me and we can sort that out, or contact the publisher's helpline. When you are able to enter the Phil's lab, it's the very last lab that I can at least see, lab number 42, and the name of the lab is ADH lab, so antidiuretic hormone. So that's what the lab this week is all about. It really is not meant to be that you spend your time fighting to get an access there. So if you are having any hard time to access that, I want you to rather let me or someone else to help you so you don't end up spending all of your time fighting with the technology. I want you to focus on actually doing the labs. So lab number 42, ADH lab, antidiuretic hormone. I'm just going through quickly so that we have time to go through the material real quick because it is a short chapter. Here's the phone number for the technical support. They know that students run often into these challenges, so there's nothing to worry about contacting them. Now what I'd like to do, I'd like to jump on to another PowerPoint, provided that I have luck with moving from one screen to another. Ooh. And I want to quickly review the material that we have. That we have for this week. I'm going to have to close a couple of windows so I get it opening properly. Let's try now. This is so weird. Share. What I'm going to have to close one window to get it to run. This is the worst time for technology to be a nightmare. Let's have this running. Now we are getting to this week's material. And this week's material, I'm going to go through it rather quick because it really is a simple chapter. It might sound like there's a lot, but really the key concept that we'll look at this week is going to be the nephron. And you'll learn all about what a nephron is, and everything else is kind of just a general review of the urinary system. So you might remember this slide that we kind of finished with the last time, how this was all that your body did, breaking sugar down into energy, and as a byproduct you ended up with carbon dioxide and water, and how we got rid of the carbon dioxide through respiration, but we needed to have urinary system to get rid of the hydrogen. This is what I meant when I said that you need to know chemistry. This is as much of chemistry as you need to know, that there's stuff that our body does and we need to get rid of it. And that's why we've got different systems in the body to get rid of these different things. So this is just kind of an introduction. The urinary system is important and it interlinks with other systems. What we are going to look at in this chapter are going to be kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. And we're going to start this first part with the kidneys. And like I said, we're going to be focusing on a microscopic structure of the kidneys. If you're like me, that you're not madly in love with things that you cannot see with a naked eye, unfortunately, with the urinary system, the whole point and the most important structure is going to be one of those structures that we can't see. So we need to do a little bit of microscopic anatomy, microanatomy. But let's start with the kidneys. And I listed here just some of the functions that kidneys do, but like we remember, the biggest function of the kidneys was to regulate blood pressure and regulate the total volume of fluids in the body. So it's controlling, do we have too much fluids, too little, and making any changes that need to take place in response to that. And then there's a bunch of other functions. But if we have a look of a kidney, we end up noticing that it is this kind of reddish brown bean shaped, if you wish to describe it, but bigger than a bean structure. Really what we see there is that we see kidneys have a very smooth surface, and this smooth surface is because they are enclosed inside a structure known as renal capsule, so inside this connective tissue layer. We'll also notice that we have this concave, larger curvature, which is always facing to the medial side, the lateral side, and in the medial side, we have this smaller curvature where we have our renal hilum, where all the vessels come in and ureter leaves the kidney and so on. Another way you might hear sometimes kidney being described that it's a retroperitoneal. That refers to the peritoneum, which I think you learned on your BIO201, that there's a layer called peritoneum that lines the digestive or the abdominal cavity. So it's behind all of that. What I'm trying to say is that kidneys are way further back than people often think. So they really lie close to the back. For example, if you sleep on an electric blanket and you sleep it with back on, and you sleep on your back, you want to be careful that you don't fry your kidneys. So they are really, really surfaced at the back of your body. What we'll also notice is that the left kidney is higher than the right. And this is where students are often, why? Well, there's nothing magic to it. It's a very simple explanation. The explanation is that if you think where the liver is located, it's going to cause it to be lower. And one final thing that I wanted to mention was that we have the adrenal gland. You remember we've talked about that before, at the very top of the kidney. And if you need to go, you just go for it. I'm going to quickly show, we're not going to look at the clinical issues. That's for the full lecture video that's going to be available. But what I want to talk about is that with the kidneys, we see once again these terms cortex and medulla. So cortex is this outermost layer that we end up seeing with the kidneys. And in the medulla, we have something that shows up as a darker tissue. And these are known as renal pyramids. They're kind of these triangle or cone-shaped structures that all open up to this renal pelvis, which then opens and continues as a ureter out of the kidney. But this is really, just remember that there is a cortex, there is a medulla, and then there's pelvis. Pelvis refers to this part where our ureter will start from. It collects all the pee, all the urine that's been produced within the kidney. I also have listed there a little bit about the flow of the urine, but really it just goes, everything ends up to the ureter. That's the big point they take away from that. You might be thinking that I'm going super fast through. Don't worry, the biggest and most important part is coming here. Don't worry. So this is what our chapter is all about. Our chapter is all about nephrons. Nephrons are the structural and functional units of the urinary system and of the kidneys. So some students prefer to draw this themselves. Some prefer to use a handout, which I will provide on your Canvas course module for this week. So you can study it any way you wish. But let's go through it one by one, piece by piece, so it doesn't become as overwhelming. So what we have here, we see first of all that blood comes to a single nephron through an arteriole. And if you remember what we learned, arterioles were basically just small arteries right before we get to the capillaries. And if it was an afferent, it meant that it brought it in. And if it was an efferent, it meant that it took the blood away. So blood is coming through this small vessel, and it reaches a structure known as glomerulus. Glomerulus is this network of capillaries. So now there's a bunch of capillaries here, and whatever blood doesn't get taken up from these capillaries then continues back through the cardiovascular system and leaves the nephron through an efferent arteriole. What we'll also notice that around this sac or around this network of capillaries, we've got the first part of the nephron, which is almost like a ball around this capillary network, and it's known as Bowman's capsule, or sometimes also known as glomerular capsule. Which term you use, both are the same, so it's up to you, whatever you prefer. And remember, you can have your notes in the exam, so I would just make a really good notes of what is a nephron and what parts make up a nephron. So far we've seen there's blood coming in, there's a bunch of capillaries, and these capillaries are inside the glomerular capsule. So glomerular capsule surrounds it on all sides. This is just a cross section. Well, now, in this glomerular capsule, some of the fluids from the capillaries get taken up in a process called filtration. So the green arrow symbolizes process known as filtration. And I will have all these written up in the couple of slides from now. So this is the first stage where the nephron is filtering stuff out of the blood. And it could be the extra fluid, it could be anything like uric acid, it could be toxins, it could be anything really. So that blood gets filtered within the glomerular capsule. And whatever gets picked up from the blood travels down this tube that's kind of a thicker tube. And because it's closer to the glomerular capsule, it's proximal. And we call this part proximal convoluted tubule. So basically that means that it's a thicker part of the tube that's located close to the glomerular capsule. So now all these products of the filtration of what has been taken up from the blood travels down the nephron in its proximal convoluted tubule. And if you look, after that, the nephron turns into very, very thin tube. And right next to that thin tube, we have our blood vessel running. That tells us that there's something going to be happening. This is a site of some sort of a physiological business. Well, we have our products of the filtration traveling down the proximal convoluted tubule until we reach this thin tube, which is known as nephron loop, or sometimes loop of Henle after the anatomist who first identified. Loop of Henle or nephron loop is in a close proximity with a blood vessel here. Okay, what happens next is that nephron is almost like going to do shopping with a very indecisive person. First, we have done our filtration up here, but now some of the material that we picked up from the blood, we return it back to the blood from nephron. And this event is known as reabsorption. And I will have these terms written to you in few slides. But during the nephron loop, the loop of Henle, some of the liquids from the nephron are reabsorbed back to the blood vessels. Well, you can imagine what happens at the later part of the nephron loop. Well, some of the material again from the blood vessel gets dumped back into the nephron. This is known as secretion. So the purple arrow here symbolizes secretion. So first we take stuff from the capillaries to the nephron in the glomerular capsule in a process of filtration. Then this material travels down the proximal convoluted tubule until it reaches the loop of Henle or nephron loop. And in here, some of it was reabsorbed back, but then after that, some of it was secreted back to the nephron. So it's kind of indecisive process. And now we get to the last part of the nephron, which is not proximal, but this time distal convoluted tubule. And you'll notice distal convoluted tubule just wiggles around, and this is where everything gets carried until we have this duct, which is known as collecting duct, that collects the final product from multiple nephrons. So there would be multiple nephrons emptying into this collecting duct. And whatever gets dumped into the collecting duct is known as our excretion. That's the urine. That's the pee that we have produced in a nephron. So that was really quick. So here's all the structures that we discussed. It looks like a lot, but really if you go through it step by step, it's not that much. So we have blood coming into the nephron within the capillary bed, which is our glomerulus. Some of it gets taken up in a process of filtration to the glomerular capsule. It travels down the proximal convoluted tubule until we reach the loop of Henle, or also known as nephron loop, where some of the contents of the nephron were reabsorbed and some of it was secreted back. And then whatever is left continues traveling within the distal convoluted tubule until whatever is left, which is our excretion, gets dumped into the collecting duct. And collecting duct collects the secretion from multiple different nephrons. So if you were thinking of those events, physiological events, they were filtration, reabsorption, secretion, and excretion. And all of this, I will have a diagram where you can fill in all these terms, you can fill in all these events if it helps you to learn. Just a quick word of warning. I had a student, and I don't know how he misunderstood me this totally. He thought that nephrons are always oriented in this way, that nephron blood always comes from the left and the urine always goes to the right. This could be a mirror image. This could be upside down. This could be in any way. It's not that nephrons are always seen from this direction. But these parts and these physiological processes are always there. This brings me to the final part. And remember, nephron was the biggest thing you need to learn in this chapter. Final part of the nephron. We sometimes test how well your nephrons work. And the test for that is known as GFR, glomerular filtration rate. It basically is a numeric value that tells us that how much fluid goes through the kidney in 1 minute. And this is an important value because many drugs, many contrast agents, many other procedures are dependent on how well your kidneys work. So we use this GFR number as a criteria. Can you be given a drug? Can you be given a contrast agent? And so on and so on. Well, now we get to the very last thing. And after this, everything is breeze on this chapter. You remember our hormone ADH from when we talked about endocrine system. ADH was a hormone that caused us to do less urine, pee less. Well, ADH acts on the distal convoluted tubule, making the walls of the distal convoluted tubule very porous. So all of a sudden, we are able to take back a lot of material from the nephron. So this is how the reuptake of the fluids from the nephron work. And that's all you need to know about nephron. Rest of the chapter is just going through the rest of the parts of the urinary system, so we can have a look of the urine. Most of it is water. There's some solutes, there's urea, there's uric acid, creatine, and then various other elements. What we should not find in urine, we should not find blood. We should not find high amounts of sugars, proteins. That would be a sign of issues with the diabetes, and so on and so on. Then we have our ureters. They're simply muscular tubes that carry the urine that's made by the kidney to the urinary bladder. And they are smooth muscles, so that tells us that you can do the transport of the urine even if you're upside down, even if you're in space, and so on. If you need to go, the rest of the video will be available in a couple of minutes. It's really gonna be like 5 more minutes. So you go, don't be late for your meeting, but I will just finish off talking, so I have a recording for that.
Okay, thank you.
Drive safe, don't be late.
All right.
So, like I said, we have the smooth muscle tube that connects the kidneys to the urinary bladder, and the function of this is simply transportation of the urine from the kidney to the urinary bladder. Nothing else happens there. And because it is smooth muscle, we're able to do this peristalsis, which is the kind of wave-like movement of materials within a tube. So this is how urine is able to pass from the kidneys to the urinary bladder, no matter in what position you are. Urine is being moved always. Couple of other words that I could throw in about the ureters. They are retroperitoneal, so again, behind, posterior to the peritoneal layer, peritoneum, and they enter to the kidney, although this diagram, or they enter to the urinary bladder, although this diagram shows as if they would join high up, they actually curve around the urinary bladder at the posterior side and open here at the very bottom, so at the very inferior part of the urinary bladder. And let's have a look at that. We're going to be looking at the urinary bladder now. So urinary bladder is nothing but a temporary storage place for urine. So it's a muscular sac that can stretch and condense depending on how much urine we have inside. It does not do anything to the urine. It does not concentrate it. It does not manipulate it. Nothing. It's just a storage pouch. What is going to be important about the urinary bladder is that we have 3 different openings at the bottom part of it. So we have these 2 ureters, one from left, one from right, that we just discussed, that entered at the very bottom of the urinary bladder. And then we have one opening at the bottom, but more anteriorly, which is, of course, our urethra, which carries the urine out of the body. So these 3 openings that we find in the urinary bladder form a structure known as trigone. So triangular structure made of 2 ureters more posteriorly and 1 urethra more anteriorly. And this brings me to talk about the next thing, which is going to be, of course, our urethra. And sometimes you can have your urinary bladder infected. Well, infection of the urinary bladder is more likely on females than in males, and we'll have a look of that in a second. But first, I want to just mention about the urethra. Again, it's a muscular tube. There's various sphincters that help us to control that when we are ready to release ourselves, to get rid of the urine in our urinary system. So we hold urine usually pretty successfully within the urinary bladder. Sometimes we need to empty it, and when we're ready to empty, usually these sphincters are under conscious control. So we are able to choose when we release those. Like I said, the length of the urethra varies from males to females. You'll notice that males have longer urethra than females, and this has an important consequence. Infections are much more common, urinary tract infections, on females because the length of the path that bacteria has to travel to get into the urinary bladder and so on is shorter in females. So it has nothing to do with the level of hygiene or staying clean or avoiding sitting on a cold rock like I've heard once. It has all to do with just a physical difference in the length of the urethra. And finally, final thing that I'm going to mention about the urinary system in this short review is that the act of urination is known as micturition. So this is the fancy word if you want to tell rather than, oh, I need to go to the restroom, you can tell that you're going to go and practice some micturition. That's the anatomical medical term for the act of urination. And act of urination is controlled that there has to be all these three events happening at the same time. So we're usually very, very successful in controlling that when do we urinate and when don't we urinate. Of course, if there's too much urine building up, then that might become an issue that we're not able to control. And before I wrap up this lecture, this review, remember the full story is available on your lecture videos. I do want to mention that we often fail to look at what happens when you get older to different structures and different systems. And usually when we look at those, the news are always bad. Things are getting worse. Things are not great when you get older. When in case of the urinary system, this is actually the one time when I can say that getting older isn't a big deal. Urinary system is in general over-engineered so that it's going to function, it's going to work well regardless of the fact that you get older. Of course, there's some slowing down, some scarring might occur, some cell death, some loss of glomeruli, flow of blood might be slower, there might be less holding capacity, so need for more frequent toilet breaks. But by and large, urinary system works really well, regardless if you age or if you're younger. So it's thanks to this over-engineering in the urinary system. So this is all I have to say as a quick review of this week's chapter. And what we're going to do, we're going to jump back into our weekly review of the material. So let me just open a right screen here. Hopefully I get this there. This seems good to me. So you should be able to see that we just finished the review of the key points of the urinary system. Remember, this is not the full lecture material, but this is at least what are the main points that you need to know. I really encourage you to learn the nephron, structure of nephron, and physiology of nephron. That's the most important part of the urinary system. And look at the full lecture videos, which are available for you on your Canvas module. These are just familiar reminders that you've seen before. I remind you that you're able to retake assignments, or if you have missing assignments, I'm totally happy to facilitate that. Just message me directly on Canvas with specific details which assignment you are wanting to reattempt. And then also, like I said, we have tutoring resources available. I'm happy to tutor. You have tutoring from the college through the Cranium Cafe. I can set up also times for group sessions or small groups or a full class or one-on-one. Just let me know how I can help you. And this concludes the review of this week's lecture material. I know that it was a quick one. Remember that there is the full material available on the lecture videos. Really, the big thing here is to be very comfortable with nephron as a structure. And that pretty much summarizes everything that we need to know about this week's material. Remember though, like I said, because the module was opened a little late, you have almost 2 weeks, 2 weeks minus 2 days. So not until next Sunday, but even after that, another week until the Sunday in the following week to finish these. So I think that that's going to put us on November 8th. And as always, if you need extra time, you just let me know. So this is all I had for our weekly session. on the week 10, focusing on the urinary system. Like I said, make sure that you contact me if you have any questions. I am here to help. I really want you to feel good about yourself. You all did really well on the exam and practical too. Remember, the score that you're going to see as a final score is going to be released shortly. What you're seeing yet is not the final score. So just follow those announcements I will post when the final scores are available. And I think that that concludes our review session for this week. I hope you have a very good rest of the week, and just let me know if there's anything that I can assist with. Have a good week.